George R.R. Martin says that not having a specific character in episode 1, Blood and Cheese, and not having it play out the way it did in his book will send ripples throughout the rest of the seasons. And he does drop a couple of hints that season 3 and 4, he's already not happy with the talks that they're in and the way that Ryan's going to play it out.
If he has plans at all.
Yes.
Someone saying it was very Olenna Tyrell, like...
He's a sassy bitch. I got to give it to him.
He's the guy who invented Olenna Tyrell. George went to his Not a blog, which, even though I'm a fan of the books, I'm not a avid reader of the Not a blog.
You're a bit more kill the author?
Partly, I am that, but also just because the only news I want to have is Winter yet.
Right. You don't care unless he brings it up.
Yes, unless Winds of Winter is being mentioned and is being released, I don't think I really care what the man's up to.
Yep.
The books are famous, not necessarily he's famous, at least in my eyes. So he'd been teasing at, I think, Worldcon, which was in Scotland, a big fantasy event. He was down there, and then he was at the Oxford. He was hyping up the blog post, intentionally or not. Like, I'm going to make a blog post about this, maybe several blog posts, who knows?
He's a drama queen for sure.
It's a sad state of affairs that we are looking forward to an author's blog post about an adaptation of his work rather than a new release of his ongoing potential magnum opus.
It is interesting, though.
Yeah.
It
is interesting. The Blood and Cheese event, which happened in episode 1 of season 2, had been slightly changed for television, and while it still had a gut-wrenching effect of we've chopped a lad's head off, and there was, to book fans like me, that there was a few little changes that I felt prevented it from being an ultimate gut punch.
What were those bits? What sucked away from it for you?
For me, it was Alison not being in the room, which we mentioned, because that takes away a lot from her character, and well, she needed something this season.
She needed the fire.
So it would have been good to have had that. Yeah, the Alison who whips out the knife. We're going to try and not talk about it because we already have a video. We have hours of videos discussing our thoughts and opinions on the season. So you should go watch them and come back here. But he was annoyed that Maelor, who is in the world, is the youngest child and second son of Aegon and Helena, about 2 years old in the book, a baby, was omitted from the scene. And his reasoning at first seems, which I would think, and you also having experience on a set, and anyone reasonably would go, yeah, having a baby would be stressful.
Yeah, well, that's what Ryan Condal, the showrunner, pointed out to George. And apparently the budget was already pretty stretched. They needed to save money anywhere they could. And apparently having a 2-year-old on set would be way too much work.
Then you've got to have parents on set. You've got to have handlers.
That's also a bit dramatic. Like, Game of Thrones left a baby in an ice thing and just, left him in the snow.
You know, there's that infamous scene in American Sniper where I think Clint Eastwood, a very classic man, has a dislike of working with babies and children. So Bradley Cooper is quite obviously holding a plastic baby and has to work the thumb to just give it some movement.
But also, robot babies exist now.
One can work around it.
Yes.
You know, how many seconds would there be of a baby, or not just the back of a baby, or a bundle, or something. Ryan had hinted that maybe Maelor could make a appearance in later seasons.
Yeah, to satiate George, Ryan said, we're not deleting Maelor, we're just pushing him back. She's going to give birth at the end of season 2 so that he's in season 3.
Which obviously isn't the case.
Because his pee-pee exploded.
Yeah.
Some people were loving the idea of, because then they're like, oh, did Aegon bang her the night before? Or is it actually Aemon's baby?
Well, that's it. You could work the Aemon thing in, yeah.
Because there's always that fan theory. Gives a bit of spice to the fan imagining of the show. And George says that once he heard that, he's like, all right, I won't fight. It doesn't seem like that big of a change. He kind of plays it off that he didn't think it would be as dramatic as it ended up being.
Which then leads him to talk about, the big point is the butterfly effects of that, and then he goes into spoilers, which...
I think we can touch on spoilers, because I read it, and honestly, it's barely a spoiler as is, but it's also... We're getting further and further off book that most things that he mentions probably aren't going to come to pass.
There's certain horrifying things that will happen to Maelor later on in the story that is quite horrifying and disgusting.
Yes.
Which I imagine maybe people who are playing a television show, it's one thing to write about it in a distant history book than it is to actually show that.
Basically, Maelor gets ripped apart.
Yes.
Because Alicent sends her children away in fear of the castle getting sacked. In a real Rhaenyra moment, sends them off with like very little protection.
And since Helena, who at least in the book is a happy, cheerful woman who likes to ride her dragon and is loved by the people, whereas Rhaenyra at this point in the story isn't that much
loved by the people is a huge thing in it from what I can see. But basically she sends her kids away. One of them makes it to where they're going and the other gets found out in a tavern, and then the townspeople, because Rhaenyra has a bounty on the child's head for alive, like she didn't say murder this baby, but there's a reward for the baby, so people are all trying to grab the baby. They tear the baby apart. You could say that HBO doesn't want to show a baby get torn apart, but also you show a crowd hunching around a thing and you show like bloody rags flying or something. You can do it like a cartoon if you really want to.
Like the way they did it with the sound of the carving. A baby squealing and then suddenly not squealing.
And it does seem like a powerful moment, but to me, that doesn't matter. I think George is putting a lot of stock on it the way he wrote it, because obviously that is the way he wrote it, and he would want that story to go ahead. But I don't think they're lacking for dramatic moments they could do. Like, they could have the little girl get torn apart.
And it's also strange that this is the point that there's so many things that this blog post could have been about, like the changes to Alicent and Rhaenyra.
Yes.
There's so many things that this could have been. I mean, I think he wanted to use it as it being the thesis statement of the little changes can lead to bigger changes.
And it's just a good punchy statement.
It's a good punchy statement. Like, for example, a butterfly effect of a author failing to finish their work, so therefore leads those adapting it to making really bad decisions.
And not having 3 books to work off.
Yeah, maybe that's more like a dragon wings effect, maybe.
You're meant to be the book fan. No, that's the funny thing. It's like, he's putting a lot of stock in it, and a lot of people are more, I think, using this blog post, not going in on what he said. They're more going in like, oh, he's going after Ryan, he's going after HBO.
Sarah Hess.
Yeah, he's putting a lot of stock in this one change, and you're right, he's probably doing it so that it's more punchy. Because if you try to explain what went wrong with Rhaenyra and Alicent, it took us an hour. You're not doing that in a blog post. Like, that's so intricate, and it's also ongoing, and it's more correctable, whereas not having Maelor is not really correctable.
And he's using it as imagine where all the other little changes they'll be making.
Yeah.
And then he kind of gets a little bit petty with the whole, who knows if Ryan has any plans for season 3 and 4. I try and subscribe to the death of the author stuff, because ultimately the books will last and these people will, you know, like, I mean, it's nice to see the interviews, but when I'm wanting to look up an author interview, I want to see the author just talking about the book they've written.
Yeah.
I don't want to see the author having opinions on other things, because if I want opinions on politics, I'll go to my politics page for that.
Yes.
I just want you to be author man or author woman talking about the book.
For me, it's also, I'm a big kill the author, because everyone seems to be turning out to be an awful person.
That too.
And everything I love won't exist if I write people into it.
If you do the rule of I'm going to look up this person before I read it, you'll, sadly, because people are assholes.
Yeah.
You know, it turns out authors are too assholes. So I say this as a preemptive that I'm about to go in and make some assumptions other people are making. Since George was in Oxford, which is the place of Tolkien, he went to go see J.R. Tolkien's grave, and he wrote about it on his blog post, and he was saying how he was quite surprised to see letters there that Tolkien obviously will never read, like assumingly thanking him for his wonderful work. And George, being a 75-year-old man, is considering his own legacy and what will people leave at his grave. Probably letters saying any news on wins.
We all know the one thing that would be left at his grave is subscribe.
That's the only thing that matters. But he's become incredibly concerned about his legacy, and people think that he is believing that the HBO productions will be what he's remembered for.
Yeah.
And so that he's concerned that this world that obviously he's put a lot of care into, but with him going, oh, what was my legacy? Will it be like Tolkien's? I think Tolkien would probably say his children were his legacy.
Yeah.
And George doesn't have that. And George is deeply concerned about how his work will be perceived. And I feel like if Tolkien was alive and was annoyed to see they cut Tom Bombadil from Lord of the Rings, or
well, he's back now,
he might then privately go, well, at least the kids are looked after financially. Like, at least, you know, where George doesn't have that. George is financially covered. He's 75 years old.
So you're thinking he's trying to distance himself from the production through these snarky comments?
A little bit. I think, well, he kind of has, hasn't he? I mean, he deleted it, but that's too late because people can screenshot and Wayback Machine and all that stuff. But I think this is what it's coming from, is that it's him maybe trying to strangle control back. His advice wasn't being taken and he was becoming incredibly infuriated.
It does seem a bit of a way that you could put pressure on Ryan Condal and HBO to make some changes, because like he can rile up the fans basically.
Well, that's it, right? Because then you get fans of varying qualities of character.
In reference to his own blog post and his own book, Fire and Blood, I don't know whether this went on his brain, I just thought of it then. He talks about how Helena was loved by the people, but Rhaenyra was definitely not loved by the people at that point, which then made the people rise up and kicked Rhaenyra out of King's Landing and back to Dragonstone. So is that him being a cheeky little, like, everyone loves me, people don't love Ryan. If we kick Ryan out, like, that'd be very heavy-handed.
And then you get, the clips of early Ryan talking before season 1. We just want to stay as close to the book as possible. And
well, he does reference that in his blog post, and he says, like, me and Ryan talked a lot about season 1, and it seems like he was very happy with season 1. Yeah, it's like that's maybe that's again why Blood and Cheese is such a sticking point for him, because that's the first big deviation.
Yeah, and well, we say this, but then he went on record saying that the shows for Viserys are better for Viserys.
Yes, I've seen some discussion on Reddit where people are really for or against the Rhaenyra and Alicent being friends rather than stepmom, stepdaughter. Some people are like, oh, it worked really well in season 1, but they haven't done anything with it. Yeah. And I'd agree with that. And that's the way we kind of felt in previous episodes as well.
Yeah, he's a guy because it's his world, he cares about every element. He cares obviously about the story and the themes, but then he's also really happy that the dragons are different colours and different shapes, just like he described. He's a big nerd for his own stuff, which is fine. He's like an OG nerd, like was that the first Comic-Con sort of stuff. I mean, his first published bit of writing was him writing into Stan Lee to Marvel Comics, and it got, on the back, fans writing. I think if anyone has a writing plan about an adaptation, it's probably the guy who wrote the original work.
He's completely found it. Don't blame him at all.
But then also there's a level of professionalism, and that maybe it was said behind closed doors, but then also it should maybe stay behind closed doors, because now you're going to rile up fans of various character who will now use this as a shield behind maybe, not saying all fans, but there are some fans who are maybe still annoyed that, certain characters are black.
It's giving them ammunition they don't need.
So they get the hide going, well, George doesn't even like it either.
Yeah.
And it kind of halts discussion. And obviously I've seen extreme fans on the other side who, George better shut up about my girl Rhaenyra. It's like, well, he created her, so he can do whatever he wants discussing that character.
That's another interesting thing, is that the blog was removed. It survives via the Wayback Machine, which is, he knew that would happen. HBO surely knew, but they still needed to kill it. But it's also very potentially he said something he shouldn't have said about season 3 or 4. Reading it, there's nothing specific. He barely says anything. Yeah. But it could still be in breach of contract, because like lawyers can grab onto whatever they want to.
I would say an example of someone who is maybe has more rights to be pissed off would be the author of The Witcher, Andrew Sapkowski. While he was annoyed at The Witcher because he didn't get enough money from the games initially, he has now got enough money. He's famously a bit of a miserable sod. I think that it's just his character, but he is someone who has no involvement in the Witcher adaptation, nor does he want involvement in the Witcher adaptation, and all he asked for was that he be notified of what they are doing in the season, and he has no veto powers. He just wanted to be politely told, here's what we're planning, and he goes, oh yes, thank you, and how much is that? And then he gets paid. And that's partly his character, because he probably doesn't care as long as he's getting paid, but also Sapkowski finished his Witcher books. So he knows that those books are the actual body of work that will be recalled.
Well, Fire and Blood is finished, though.
Sure, but it's supplementary material to a main story.
Yes.
But still, I'd say when you look over at Andrew, who's like, whatever, oh no, they've really done a bad job with that Netflix series, and they viewed it more as a product than actually a story. Yeah. Just, we need fantasy product.
They needed a Game of Thrones.
We need a Game of Thrones, so let's do, something that isn't like Game of Thrones at all, and let's just do that. And he has every right to go and be bitchy about it, but he isn't. Instead, he quietly collects his checks and has now finished another Witcher book that'll be out next year.
George has given himself a weird amount of involvement where he's listed as executive producer, but he's not a writer on the show itself, and he doesn't seem to have any say in what happens. Through talks, he can say, hey, Ryan, I don't like that. But Ryan can be like, I'll do whatever I want. He's also going to the set itself and getting tours, getting filmed, and saying, oh, that's really cool. Like talking about his face on a weirwood tree. It's just a very strange amount of involvement that means people can get view weird.
They even said that behind the scenes, someone involved in the production said, oh, we were told that we should always have George around because it's the equivalent of having Tolkien on set. Like, it's good to have his approval and his wisdom, which just feels like promo just to go, hey, aren't we listening?
So it's a way to appease the fans, really. But again, back on George saying that the butterflies are moving, he does also say that it probably won't matter to anyone that isn't a book fan because they won't know any better.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, and which is most people watching the show. Like, the actual book fans are a very small subset of the show. Say someone that had never seen either, had read both, or watched the show first, then read the book, they probably wouldn't be able to put one above the other. The only thing it changed, in my opinion, is the Alicent thing, because he doesn't reference Alicent in his blog post at all in regards to Blood and Cheese. He doesn't say that she was in the room, like you said, which is exactly what she needed for the show. She needed hatred. But the child seems very insignificant. And again, I get that's the whole point of his post, where he's like, the little thing will add up. But if that little thing never happens, then the big things will never happen. And those big things don't actually affect most main characters except the uprising after Helena's death. So that's kind of the only thing they need to keep for story reasons. And they're already getting Alicent trying to leave the city before it gets sacked. Like, they're already setting up all that stuff. So I just don't think that this is a problem with the show. The show has so many other problems.
Yeah, it's not the problem of the show. It's just a problem. I saw a guy called Crusader Chris said it's like 20 on my list of problems, and it's like below Targaryen eyes not being purple.
Fair, yeah.
He goes, it's like not having Maelor's not the biggest thing.
If they were purple, you've seen Ahsoka, right? Painful to look at. Like, does not look good.
Well, Daniel Radcliffe apparently had an allergic reaction with one of those rare few.
And Hermione Granger couldn't do the buck teeth. They tried it and she couldn't say any lines. So they're like, it's not worth it.
Not worth it. It's kind of a bit of a crater. I was already feeling pretty down post season 2. I didn't enjoy it much. So to now have the author go, yeah, and I can't even have any control. They're not letting me be in there. It feels very George Lucas after he sold Disney. You know, very just.
I think George did it pretty gracefully. He just doesn't talk about it. He just pretends it doesn't exist.
For me, I love George Lucas, and he's always right in the end. And I mean, we're going off talking about different George now. He realised 20 years ago, no one's fucking happy with Star Wars. They say they are, but no matter what I do, they're going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
I'll say it to Disney, and then they can be fucked off, and then I'll just enjoy my billions of dollars.
$4 billion, crazy.
And so then he gets the last laugh once more, and now everyone's going, oh, bring George back. The prequels weren't that bad after all.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've all kind of had a bit of a post-prequel, oh, well, actually, Revenge of the Sith, you know, it's a pretty strong ending. I think, George, my advice for him would be, and I know this is the obvious thing, but if you're concerned about your legacy, there's something that really is your legacy that needs a lot of tending to. So maybe instead of writing blog posts and having people getting hyped up about your blog posts, they should be getting hyped up about your Winds of Winter release. And then a dream. We are dreaming of a dream of spring.
But again, it's a very small subset of fans. So realistically, he probably would be remembered for the TV show.
Because that's the greatest show of all time with the worst ending.
Yeah, I've seen pretty much season 8 levels of backlash for season 2, which is kind of, it's an exaggeration for sure.
It's people just being guarded. It's like, we've been here before.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing how quickly it turned and people are just like suddenly mad. There are still a lot of casual fans that haven't noticed. That still like, it's a good show. Like, this is fun.
Oh, it's not horrendous.
Yeah.
And also I'd argue that watching that show will just, for various reasons, guide people to the books.
Yes.
Which is what's happened with Sapkowski with The Witcher. It's already a popular series that has now become more popular because people are watching the show, playing the games, and going, oh, I'll go buy more of these books.
He probably should finish the book so that in 30 years when they remake it like they're doing to Harry Potter, they actually have something to go off.
That's exactly it.
It kind of makes no sense that he is a man with writing credits, and that was what he did for years, was work on TV shows.
Showran. He knows the pains of adaptation because he's adapted works before. He did Beauty and the Beast. He's done episodes. Like, he's done stuff.
Yeah.
And also, he's adapted his own work because he wrote a few Game of Thrones episodes. In season 2, he wrote the the Blackwater battle.
Oh, everyone's favorite episode.
Yeah, he wrote an episode for up to season 4, and then he stepped away to focus on that book of his.
I think he should get himself in the room. It's fair enough. He's allowed to have his blog. He can do whatever he wants. Yeah. It is just riling up the fans. Like, it doesn't matter so much as it's just kind of interesting to talk about.
Well, there's another example we could bring up alongside Andrzej Sapkowski, is that Brandon Sanderson in the watch-alongs, but also in his podcast he has with his friend, I forget what it's called, Intentionally Blank. He very politely and very professionally brought up points when he was on set saying, do you think that's a good idea, particularly with the character of Perrin killing his wife? How that is not in the book at all. Perrin does not have a wife. And just they're all 16, 17.
I know very little about Wheel of Time, but watching that felt so strange.
Yeah, and he said, but that's impossible, because now he either has to be grieving forever or he gets over it quickly.
Yes.
And you'll bug it either way. If Brandon's a planner, George he would describe himself as a gardener.
Yeah.
Where he'll plant seeds and he'll follow them. But now, instead of walling off his garden, he just keeps buying more acres of land for the garden that's now out of control to keep growing. So the books, he's wrestling with them. And he was saying at the Oxford thing, rather melancholic, he referred to a incredibly famous and a wonderful piece of sci-fi fantasy fiction, A Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. I'm a big fan of it. He said how Gene had a normal job and would work, look after the kids, and on the weekends would work on A Book of the New Sun, which is a smaller 4-book series. But when he did the whole draft, he went over it again and then made all the little corrections and all the little things to make sure it all worked perfectly together. And now he wished in an ideal world he could do that with his work, because there's so many things he wished he could go back and change, like Tyrion doing a front flip in his first chapter.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. He's not a jester. He's a serious character. Also, front flip.
When Tyrion meets Jon Snow, he slides down the banister of a staircase and does a front flip.
Wow.
And hey. And everyone's like, what the fuck is that? And then later on, he has to explain that, Tyrion's uncle taught him how to tumble and stuff. So that's why he did that thing that one time.
So dumb.
I think overall, George is very sad that his creation's getting away from him. And I think he ultimately thinks that the HBO shows will be his legacy, because he, in his heart of hearts, thinks he isn't going to finish his actual work.
But also, season 1 would not have been as popular without Paddy and the way they did Paddy. So maybe it's the swings and roundabouts.
And if he wanted this stuff to be better, in an ideal world, he would have finished A Song of Ice and Fire 15, 20 years ago. And I don't know if he said this but I feel like this maybe would have been its own set of novels, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have been 1 or 2, a duology or a trilogy of just, here's the Dance of Dragons, where he could have fleshed it out, but he didn't have time. So we got Elio and Elio's wife, I forget the name too, the OG fans, and he had them help him write the histories. So, without being cruel, maybe you should have wrote a better book, George. I mean, as much as I brought it out, it's not the greatest read in the world, and there's plenty of sections of it that are dull. The pre-dance stuff is dull, and they fixed that.
Yeah.
And you can't deny it. And I would say that first season is better than that section, and now it's reversed for season 2. I think the joke is it could easily still rebound.
Yes, I think they still have all their pieces. They just got to
use them. They just got to use them.
Yeah.
And hopefully with the fan feedback, and maybe George, maybe we'll get first episode, you've got Rhaenyra kicking a kid in the face or something.
It will be very interesting if season 3 comes around and we have a Maelor. We're like, shit, all right, the blog worked.
We're just pretending Maelor was there all along.
Yeah, everything we said today completely doesn't matter if Maelor is in the first episode. The internet bullied Sonic into becoming a normal character.
George, you are one of the most important, influential people in fantasy. I love you. Your writing it's incredible. He's such a good writer. And I think your work will be what will last. And these blog posts will disappear. And they'll be archived as the ramblings of a man whose creation got ahead of him. Unless you knuckle down, load up that weird, he has an old school computer, load it up. No, there's no internet access. And there's no autocorrect.
His legacy will probably be the books, because that's actually him, whereas everything else is going to get a remake. No one's going to rewrite his books, but we're definitely going to get another 2 or 3 Game of Thrones in the next 50 years. The whole reason they're doing Harry Potter again is they're saying we're sticking to the books this time. Even though books 1 and 2, very similar to the movie.
The first 3 films you can watch instead of reading the books.
Yes, 100%.
But Chamber of Secrets is basically the book.
Chamber of Secrets, the book, is something happens, a fuck ton of filler. Something happens, a fuck ton of filler. Like we have Nearly Headless Nick's birthday party.
They at least go to that. But the Chamber of Secrets is very much the book.
It's a 2.5-hour kids movie or something. We also want to know what you think. Like, let us know whether this changes your view on the season. Like, if you were just a show watcher, hearing that the author of the books doesn't love what they're doing, does that tweak how you feel? Or you just don't care and the show's the show? Or are you an angry fan now?